Billionaires. They're not just like us. Something happens when you reach a certain level of wealth. The jets become private, the apartments become penthouses, and the parties get real epic real fast. Here are the secret parties billionaires don't want you to know about. In the hanky-panky filled parties of Silicon Valley, dinner comes first, usually prepared by the host to avoid the prying eyes of cooks and cleaners. Social media is strictly forbidden for obvious reasons. Then the drugs come out. MDMA seems to be the top choice, although it's far from the only offering. The guests break off into groups of 2, 3, or more, usually for cuddle puddles, a cute way to describe a gang of groping millionaires and billionaires. From there, things get really freaky. The mostly male bigwigs of Silicon Valley have these drug-fueled love parties on the regular, bringing in a bevy of young women from anywhere they can get their hands on them. And get their hands on them they do, often with their wives and girlfriends right beside them. These men tend to be the wealthy tycoons behind some of the biggest brands in the world. As Emily Chang, author of the book Brotopia, describes it, they like to treat these parties as extensions of their world-changing professional philosophies by overturning traditions in their private lives. In the end, that means a boatload of hookups in private mansions, estates, and yachts the world over. You won't find a lot of Carvel ice cream cake at a billionaire's birthday party. Even Jay-Z and Beyoncé dropped $200,000 on their daughter Blue Ivy's first birthday. Businessman Ronald Perlman likes to celebrate his on a 188-foot yacht in the warm waters of St. Bart's, often flying in famous folks like Barry Manilow to sing him happy birthday. Retail tycoon Philip Green once surprised 100 of his friends with a last-minute trip to the Maldives for his 55th. And that's nothing compared to Joe Low, the Malaysian billionaire who turned his 31st birthday into the biggest bash Las Vegas had ever seen, even though no one was quite sure who he was. Low built what looked like an aircraft hangar on a vacant plot of land and then filled it up with some of the world's biggest stars. Leonardo DiCaprio, Kanye West, and Kim Kardashian were there, along with a Ferris wheel, carousel, circus trampoline, and cigar lounge. Jamie Foxx hosted with performances by Britney Spears, Q-Tip, and Chris Brown. To end the night, a giant fireworks show exploded over the Nevada desert. Henry Nicholas, the founder of the tech company Broadcom, turned a warehouse in California into a never-ending adult fantasy room. The personal pleasure pad was reportedly stocked to the brim with cocaine, meth, and ecstasy, along with cutting-edge technology, making it the ultimate spot to hang with his friends and an endless rotation of ladies of the night. And when that wasn't good enough, Nicholas allegedly hired a construction team to covertly connect the place to his home through underground passageways. This shouldn't come as a shock to the folks who know anything about him. He used to secretly spike his colleagues' drinks with ecstasy, and he once smoked so much marijuana on his private plane that the pilot was forced to put on an oxygen mask. Unfortunately, at least for Nicholas, it all came tumbling down when he was arrested for his Caligula-esque lifestyle, along with a laundry list of securities fraud. He was acquitted of all charges, but his rap sheet still isn't a great look for him. The Cannes Film Festival is a lot of things, from a glamorous party to an over-the-top trade convention. Hollywood heavyweights cut deals and schmooze with their favorite movie stars. But for the working girls who fly in, it's a bit of a goldmine. Thousands of women flock to the fest every year, from high-end call girls charging in the thousands to streetwalkers plying their trade for $50. But find the right John and you can hit it big. Some of the women have been reportedly known to make $40,000 a night. According to a Lebanese businessman who described the scene to The Hollywood Reporter, there are about 30 or 40 luxury yachts in the bay during the festival each year. Each boat is filled with about 10 women plus drugs and alcohol. And apparently, this has all been going on for the past 60 years. The 2012 Kappa Beta Phi dinner, a secret gathering of Wall Street royalty, began with the address, "Good evening, exalted high council, former grand swipes in waiting, fellow Wall Street Kappas, and worthless neophytes." The dinner was designed as an ultra-exclusive financial community fraternity at the dawn of the Great Depression. Kevin Roose, author of the book Young Money, described it as a sort of one-percenters friars club. It's a chance for some of the richest men in the world to shut the doors and let loose. It may be the only place you can see literal billionaires perform sexist and homophobic skits and sing lame song parodies about how rich they are. As Roose put it, here were executives who had strong ideas about politics, society, and the work of their colleagues, but who would never have the courage to voice those opinions in a public setting. Roose snuck into the 2012 festivities, and when he was discovered, none other than Wilbur Ross acted as a one-man bouncer and dragged him out. The black tie dinner isn't for prying eyes.
It sounds like something Occupy Wall Street would invent if they wanted people to hate bankers even more.
Burning Man may be full of trust fund kids and millionaires, but it's always gone out of its way to shun showy signs of its own wealth. Not so for Further Future, the offshoot festival designed for and by the uber wealthy. If you've always wanted to be a burner but also have access to top-notch lavender lattes, this is the spot for you. Its website lists unabashed luxury as one of its primary goals, and its guests won't be disappointed. Beyond the VIP fencing sit Airstreams and lunar palaces going for thousands of dollars per night, often fully staffed with personal valets and private chefs. If that's not good enough, Nobu offers $250 a seat dinners, or you can just take part in something called a smudging aura cleansing. Saline and vitamin transfusions are available, and there's a beer and foie gras torsion tasting. Dressed in the steampunk futurism style that's the official aesthetic of the festival, entrepreneurs and tech billionaires mingle, cutting deals between wellness panels. So let the burners eat cake. This is where the powerful come to play. As Mel Brooks once said,
"It's good to be the king."
in Saudi Arabia, it's good to be one of the kingdom's 10,000 princes, flush with cash and a lack of concern for their family's oppressive rules. Why else would a deeply religious theocracy look the other way as its royal class hosts decadent parties, breaking every law in the books? One Saudi prince named Faisal is a second-tier cadet prince, which is about as far from the throne as you can get, but he still enjoys all the perks and privileges of princehood. His epic 2009 Halloween party, whose details were revealed in a leaked diplomatic cable, is still the talk of the town. Alcohol was plentiful at the party's bar, despite being prohibited by Saudi law and custom. There were also plenty of working girls among the guests, which is allegedly not uncommon at such parties. A guest list determined who made it inside the exclusive affair. The scene resembled a nightclub with alcohol, dancing, a DJ at the turntables, and guests in costume. It's a good thing Saudi Arabia just lifted its ban on female drivers, so that next time Prince Faisal can invite even more single ladies. According to a spokesperson for Bohemian Grove, the mysterious annual retreat of political power players in Northern California, the club is nothing more than a chance to share a passion for the outdoors, music, and theater. But then again, this is where the early planning for the Manhattan Project took place, so it might not be all fresh air and camp songs. No outsiders really know for certain what this place really is, but when former President Bill Clinton was asked about it, he said,
"That's where all those rich Republicans go up and stand naked against redwood trees, right?"
Spy magazine reporter Philip Weiss managed to sneak into Bohemian Grove back in 1989 and then reported on the handful of rules he encountered. Basically, they were don't do business, don't pee on the trees, and always be drunk. Only the last rule was strictly enforced, though. Inside the campgrounds, he found powerful men making powerful decisions over copious amounts of alcohol. In one notable bit of Bohemian Grove history, in the summer of 1968, Ronald Reagan reportedly agreed not to primary Richard Nixon as the two mingled there. At the 2018 President Club charity dinner at London's Dorchester Hotel, host Johnny Gold declared, "Welcome to the most un-PC event of the year." That may actually be an understatement. Supposedly a fundraiser for a variety of English charities, the real purpose of this men's-only gathering seems to be a bit more nefarious. British power players from the worlds of finance, politics, and business gather every year to throw their money around, imbibe, and leer at the scantily clad hostesses. In fact, that last part seems to be the main purpose of the party. Hostesses are hired based on their looks and then ordered to wear black underwear to better match the skimpy outfits they're given upon arrival. Once their phones are confiscated, they're given drinks to loosen them up and then paraded out for the men to gawk at. This was reported by Madison Marriage of the Financial Times, who went to the dinner undercover. Hands are slipped up skirts, bottoms are pinched. Drunken men dive in for kisses and ask women if they're actually sex workers. The bathrooms are even monitored and the women are timed to make sure they don't just go and hide. Keep in mind that this is a charity event with prizes including lunch with former London Mayor Boris Johnson and the proceeds going to places like a prominent children's hospital. In the wake of the Times report, future iterations have been canceled. When you're a billionaire, you don't take no for an answer, especially not when it comes to your wedding. That's how Napster creator Sean Parker found himself among the redwoods of Big Sur, California back in 2013, celebrating the most lavish wedding this country's ever seen. No expense was spared. Over months, crews built an artificial pond, a bridge, rock staircases, fake stone castle ruins, and a 20-foot-tall wrought iron gate with the couple's initials. The costume designer for the Lord of the Rings movies created Tolkien-themed outfits for all 364 guests, including Sean Lennon, Emma Watson, and California Governor Gavin Newsom. Bunnies were handed out to cuddle with. Animal furs were draped on chairs and full beds. Pigs were roasted on a spit, and Sting sang in front of a 9-foot-tall wedding cake. It was said to cost between $5 million and $10 million. But then the bad press set in, and the legal issues started. One website called it an eco-wrecking wedding, and Parker was forced to write an apology. The wedding was hosted at a luxury hotel whose owners had failed to apply for the appropriate permits. But billionaires don't get in real trouble, not for long at least. Parker paid a fine and agreed to design an app for California as restitution.
The Bohemian Club, which meets in Bohemian Grove in California, is an exclusive gathering of mostly rich white men with plenty of power. The members of this not-so-secret cabal run around the California woods annually, mostly drinking and goofing off. Here's what really happens at Bohemian Grove. One of the hard and fast rules of Bohemian Grove is weaving spiders come not here, which essentially means that no matter what, real-world deals aren't to be made at camp. There's one notable exception, and that happened in 1942. And even that's a sort of. The Bohemian Club owns Bohemian Grove, and the super-secret camping trip that happens every year only goes on for a handful of days. For the rest of the year, any members of the club can use the grounds for whatever they want. And according to Skeptoid, Bohemian Club member Dr. Edward Teller reserved the camp in September 1942. Teller would go on to be forever known as the father of the hydrogen bomb, and the groundwork for the Manhattan Project was laid there. But here's the thing. Teller was the only member of the Bohemian Club there, so it can't really be said that club members were out there planning world domination. Were they? In 1989, Spy magazine writer Philip Weiss snuck into Bohemian Grove and described the annual lowbrow theatrical production known as the Low Jinks like this. The humor was not just lame, but circa 1950s college follies lame. Those who have gotten an inside peek into Bohemian Grove say the theatrical productions are a huge deal, and the one-time production Weiss was talking about was not only filled with the type of humor an 11-year-old might find hilarious, but it also cost a whopping $75,000. That's just one of the plays the members stage for each other. There's also a more serious production called The Hijinks, or more formally, the Grove Play. Over the years, they've staged performances of St. Patrick at Tara, recited hundreds of poems, tackled subjects like the triumph of Christianity over Druidic paganism, and Jack London even wrote an original piece for the Hijinks, which was never staged. Costs go up well over $100,000 per performance, and it must be nice to have that kind of cash. Every annual meeting in Bohemian Grove has since 1880 kicked off with a ceremony called the Cremation of Care. The ceremony starts with a parade of men dressed in red hooded robes, some carrying torches, and some carrying a wooden coffin with a wooden skeleton named Care. The procession winds through camp until they make their way to the side of a lake watched over by a massive cement owl. And as spectators gather, the men playing the priests extinguish the torches. They sing a song, and a priest tells members, "Shake off your sorrows with the city's dust, and scattered to the winds the cares of life." The funeral pyre is lit, the dull cares of the world are gone, and attendees head back to camp to embark on a week of merrymaking. In 1986, the club attempted to argue, quote, that male gender is a bona fide occupational qualification, much like Hooters argued that being a female with a certain body type was a job requirement for being a server there. The Bohemian Club was less successful than the restaurant chain when it came to their lawsuits, and they were forced to open hiring practices to female employees. Of course, there's a but. Jobs for women were restricted to the dining circle and valet parking, which former Summertime employee Sophie Weiner said were the lowest paying positions. She also added that there was a very literal line on the ground that marked the place where women needed to stop. And yes, this nonsense happened in the 21st century.
The line must be drawn here. This far, no farther.
Vanity Fair got a copy of the official itinerary for 2008's encampment, and there was plenty of musical entertainment scheduled. It turns out that singing around the campfire isn't just for the Boy Scouts. And that year, Sam Cooke's music was featured in a 9:15 p.m. campfire circle. It's not all fun and games, though. The lakeside talks are always a major part of the retreat, and they're usually heavy stuff. They're scheduled for every day at 12:30 p.m. And over the years, they've been given by people like Dwight D. Eisenhower, Richard Nixon, Werner von Braun, Herbert Hoover, and Neil Armstrong. At the same time, some of the most powerful men in the world are giving talks on some hugely heavy topics. There's something else going on too. Constant drinking and what Vanity Fair calls, quote, profuse outdoor urination. They credit that to three things: gin fizzes being poured at 7 a.m., so many enlarged prostates, and such majestic natural urinals. The Bohemian Club owns 2,700 acres of redwood forest, and only a small amount of the property has been turned into a retreat. Vanity Fair and journalist Alex Shomatov suggest there's been something else going on outside the carefully groomed camp for a long time, and that's illegal logging. Shomatov was approached by former Bohemian Club member John C. Hooper, who claimed that over the course of a few years, he saw towering redwoods marked for logging, stumps replacing trees, and hiking trails turned into logging roads. Club members responded that they were logging responsibly within the guidelines of their permits, and all the money made from selling the lumber was going back into forest management. But Hooper claims otherwise, and only a few years later, the club's 100-year logging permit had been revoked, forcing the club back to the drawing board to find more modest logging proposals.
You don't hear much about them now, but for centuries, fraternal societies were as much a part of the fabric of daily life for many adults as driving kids to soccer practice and scheduling playdates are today. TV and later the COVID-19 pandemic greatly impacted the importance of societies such as the Oddfellows, the Elks, and the Lions Club. Yet for the longest time, one's fraternal society was a source of friendship, social capital, and the basis for one's charitable work. And probably the most famous, or infamous, of those orders is the mysterious group known as the Freemasons. But what do Freemasons actually believe? On the surface, the Freemasons appear to be a group of usually old men who meet at the lodge to play cards and enjoy a tall, cold one. But for centuries, both church officials and the general public were concerned about the Masons. That's because the organization has always been shrouded in secrecy, with rumors of pagan rituals, quasi-polytheistic beliefs, and to hear some tell it, a tendency to secretly pull the strings of government, finance, and world domination. Even Sherlock Holmes thought so.
The handshake and the ring, Watson, are archaic rituals preserved by the 33rd degree members of the secret order of Freemasons.
That, or they really are just a bunch of men enjoying each other's company and doing good charitable work and riding in parades, which is the version of the story they tell. So what's the truth? According to the Straight Dope, the group that eventually came to be known as the Freemasons likely began as a trade guild. At the time, the secrecy that governed the society's existence was likely at least partially due to the need to keep outsiders from learning valuable trade skills, masonry specifically. But there was also a religious aspect as well. The Freemasons allowed anyone to join as long as they believed in God, regardless of their specific religious beliefs, and that was way too inclusive for the Catholic Church. This was centuries ago, of course. Around the 17th century, the focus of the group broadened from actual stonemasonry into a society of wealthy, educated gentlemen discussing the latest trends in philosophy, like a book club for morality. It was also the time when the society became entwined with deistic beliefs, an idea that the grand architect of the universe was just that, a godlike being that created the world but has no further influence in its existence. The inclusivity and secularism of the Freemasons put them at odds with all sorts of conservative establishments, especially the Catholic Church, and for a while, Freemasonry was outright banned. As a result, the Masons were traditionally anti-monarchy and pro-republic and constitutional government, which explains why founding fathers such as George Washington and Benjamin Franklin were a part of the shadowy club. These days, Masons are still required to profess belief in a higher power, either the grand architect of the universe or, for the individual Mason, the god of their own religion, in order to join the group or stay in it. However, the Straight Dope also notes that when a Mason achieves the highest rank, the tea is spilled about what the group secretly purports to believe. That god is actually a being they call Yabalin, who is an amalgam of the Hebrew god, a Canaanite god, and an Egyptian one. Of course, few, if any, Masons actually believe all or any of that, but all the secrecy and initiation rituals of Freemasonry help promote the brotherhood of man. That sounds good on paper, but the downside is made clear by the overwhelmingly male membership of the Masons. Women were only allowed recently through offshoot chapters. That's not the only way in which the Masons have struggled to adapt to the modern world. Many conventional lodges refuse to accept anyone who is not a white male, a struggle that continues to this day. So women and minorities run their own Masonic lodges, completely separated from the traditional bands of old white men. It's a strange, archaic, and unwritten rule that sours the Freemasons' modern reputation. Hopefully, the organization will come around and return to its inclusive roots. Yabalin willing. The title of most powerful secret society ever might have to go to the Knights Templar. During the Crusades, they were an arm of the Pope and had lots of wealth. Living by a code called the Rule, they rose to prominence over the course of several centuries and became a true force to be reckoned with. The origins of the Knights Templar are incredibly humble and, frankly, not even all that mysterious. Basically, they came about because of the Crusades. The topic of the Crusades, on the other hand, is a long conversation. But the important part as relates to the Templars is that Jerusalem was taken from Muslim hands by Christian armies around the year 1099. On the surface, that seemed great for Christendom. Pilgrims from Europe could take the journey to go and visit the Holy City. But the reality wasn't quite as straightforward. The journey from mainland Europe to Jerusalem was a dangerous undertaking, and it wasn't uncommon for pilgrims to be robbed or even killed as they passed through Muslim-controlled areas. It was a problem that the French nobleman Hugh de Péan wanted to solve. Somewhere around 1118 or 1119, he created a group sworn to protect the Christian pilgrims. He coined his new brotherhood the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and the Temple of Solomon, later known as the Knights Templar or just Templars. Thus, one of history's most intriguing and powerful orders was born. Part of what allowed the Templars to become as powerful and successful as they were might have been their code of conduct. In some way, they were like a monastic order. They took their vows upon entry and then abided by a set of guidelines called the Rule with a capital R. It all started with their clothing, a white cloak adorned with a red cross. White was a symbol of their purity and chastity, the exact opposite of the flashy armor usually associated with knights. Even something as simple as a belt was replaced with a wool cord. It was all function without the fashion. None of what they wore bore any flourishes, since decorations of that nature signified arrogance. But that wasn't it for the Rule. They were beholden to the word of their Grand Master. Permission was required from their superiors to adjust their stirrups, go into town, or even bathe. Chastity was hugely important, and the topic of women was completely taboo. They couldn't talk about times they'd spent with women or even kiss female members of their families. Mealtimes were regulated as well. Meals were taken together, 2 brothers to a bowl, and meat only every other day, which was done to avoid corruption. Church services were mandatory, of course. Over time, the Templars started to garner a reputation as one of the most feared fighting units of the Crusades. They were seen as absolutely fearless. With a code that didn't permit them to retreat from battle, combined with an insane discipline, they were a force to be reckoned with. They were expertly trained with multiple weapons and exceedingly well equipped, and that was when their cavalry wasn't decimating the enemy ranks. Dan Jones's The Templars, The Rise and Spectacular Fall of God's Holy Warriors, paints them as a linchpin in the Second Crusade, leading entire armies to battle and fighting on the front lines to conquer Damascus, one of the most prominent cities in the region. Plus, they didn't just fight, but also helped fund other military campaigns and battles. People living at the time even went so far as to see them as something close to legendary. More importantly, though, rulers of different countries also started to see them as a legitimate military threat, one with too much experience and leeway. It was enough that European royalty eventually thought it best that the threat posed by the Templars should be removed completely. What sets the Templars apart from other secret societies is their relationship to the law. Powerful and secretive organizations like the Freemasons would still have to follow the law of whatever country they were in at the time, and Templars didn't have to deal with that. The order had papal backing, and with it came a papal bull in 1139 called Omnia Datum Optimum. The language is flowery, but it heaps praise on the Templars while intimately tying them to the power of the Pope, and with that power came privilege.
Whoever dies here today, you will certainly be among them.
You're a lord. I must give you the road.
They alone were entitled to any of the spoils of war that they earned while fighting against the Muslim armies. None of that had to go back to any other country, and the Templars could use those riches as they saw fit. They were completely exempt from paying any sort of taxes, and their papal protection essentially meant that they answered to almost no one. They weren't held to the rule of any kind of local authority and only had to listen to the word of the Pope. They were almost above the law. Even though the Knights Templar started as exactly what their name implies, holy warriors, one of their biggest impacts wasn't made on the battlefield. The Templars' financial system functioned a lot like a private bank. Carrying a lot of money on the journey to Jerusalem was dangerous to pilgrims for all the obvious reasons. Instead, they could deposit money in a Templar bank in Europe, receive a letter of credit, and then show that letter in Jerusalem, where they could withdraw the money. But the Templars also offered other financial services as well, beyond a simple banking system, although a lot of those services were exclusive to their higher-profile clients. King Henry III planned to buy the island of Oleron, and the Templars acted as brokers to put that deal together. There was also a point in time where they acted as pawnbrokers by holding on to the crown jewels of Great Britain as security on a loan. They were also trusted with the financials of other groups. The Pope used the Templars as tax collectors to help move collected funds to the Crusades. They were also used by English and French kings to shift money, and even put on financial boards to oversee complicated economic matters. All this because they were well known for their honesty and efficiency. The guidelines set out by the Knights Templar technically mandated that its members embrace poverty, but the reality didn't look like that. The Templars as a group were insanely rich.
He's borrowed money from the temple. So you tell him we're here to collect the debt.
Part of that came from their battles on the front lines. Rules laid out by the Pope meant that they could keep the riches they found from the lands they conquered, but another big part of it came from donations. Patrons would give them huge sums of money as a way to confirm their piety. Donating funds to the Templars essentially protected the donor's eternal soul, which, given the time period, was a pretty important thing to a lot of people. It also just happened to benefit the Templars, and on the plus side, it was a way for anyone to prove their devotion without actually taking part in the fighting of the Crusades, a much safer alternative on the whole. Those donations also occasionally included plots of land, which the Templars could turn into further revenue streams. They would use them as farmland or vineyards, among other things, which just went to further their wealth. Aside from growing into one of the most financially wealthy groups in the medieval world, the Templars also managed to turn themselves into an incredibly property-rich group. At their height, they ended up owning land all across Europe. Their estates were scattered through England and Ireland, as well as across Spain, Germany, Italy, Hungary, and most of mainland Europe. Aside from their lands on the continent, they also held on to a handful of locations in the Holy Land. This includes castles and fortresses scattered in strategic locations, stretching as far north as Antioch, which is northeast of Cyprus, and nearly as far south as Egypt. Speaking of the island of Cyprus, the Templars also owned that for a while, the whole island. The Templars bought the island from the then King of England, Richard the Lionheart. That said, their occupation didn't go well. The inhabitants of Cyprus resented the severe Templar rule and planned a massacre in 1192. The Templars learned about the plot and slaughtered people in the street rather than be besieged in their stronghold. They ultimately gave the island back to Richard but retained their holdings, some of them even returning in the late 1200s. The power of the Templars is also exemplified by the people they associated with, because while most of the individual Templars aren't named in history books, they counted kings and popes among their allies. That was the case from the beginning. Baldwin II, the king of Jerusalem at the time, took an immediate liking to the order, giving them the use of his palace on Temple Mount in 1120. This amazing location is better known as the Temple of Solomon, and the place where the Templars first got their name. About a decade later, they were officially recognized by the Catholic Church and Pope Honorius II. They also had the backing of Bernard of Clairvaux, a prominent French abbot who wrote texts in their favor. Their connections only grew from there. They had close ties to English royalty, and Richard the Lionheart in particular, who called on them to be his tithe collectors. They were especially close with French kings as well, going out of their way to help them. Louis IX was short on funds, so the Templars saw to it that they played a role in getting his armies to Egypt. Then, when he was captured, the Templars again intervened, this time to pay his ransom. By the late 12th century, the Crusades were starting to lose steam. Muslim armies finally took back Jerusalem, and over the next century, Crusader refugees fell one by one, with the Templars themselves also losing their foothold in the Holy Land. Support for the Crusades dwindled, which let criticism of the Templars rise. People began to doubt their intentions and fear their influence. King Philip IV of France was the one who acted on those accusations and vowed to bring them down. In October 1307, he rounded up a bunch of French Templars, including their Grand Master Jacques de Molay, arresting and torturing them until they confessed to a laundry list of sins, including heresy, sodomy, and financial corruption. It's hard to say whether any of those forced confessions were true, but in the end, it didn't really matter. In 1310, a trial led to over 50 Templars being burned at the stake. In 1312, Philip pressured Pope Clement V into officially dissolving the Templars. The final nail in the coffin came in 1314 when dozens of Templars, de Molay included, were executed for those earlier confessions.
So they are dying for what the Pope would command them to do.
Yes, but not Christ, I think.
Even though modern perspectives tend to see the Templars as a secret society, their existence was never doubted at the height of their power. After all, it's hard to think that a well-oiled military machine that could help facilitate wars would be able to go completely undetected and under the radar. But they still fit the profile of a secret society, despite the renown they won in their time. For the most part, what they really sought was privacy, but they weren't trying to remain hidden. Among their most private ceremonies were their initiation rituals, and these came under a lot of fire. Friends and family weren't invited to them, and that made others believe the practices were suspect. For a while, people believed that the rituals included spitting on the cross and denying Christ, but many of these claims came from confessions made under torture. The rituals were nothing near that. They were mostly a series of questions and vows. Still, questions abound. For instance, in 2017, the Khaitan Caves were discovered, showing the world a labyrinth of carved caverns. Though extremely unlikely, some believe that the caves were used by the Templars. But to what end? Some sort of secret religious ritual, probably, but the details are sparse. Despite having been dissolved in the early 14th century, the Knights Templar still managed to capture the wonder and imagination of the modern world. Even 700 years after the death of the last Grand Master, myths and legends still abound. Conspiracy theorists still pose questions about the relics the Templars may or may not have had in their possession. No, they didn't have the Shroud of Turin, the Holy Grail, the Ark of the Covenant, or actual pieces of the cross from the crucifixion, but it's fascinating to speculate about if they did. Then there are myths of a Templar treasure hoard, taken to some mysterious place just before the persecution they faced in the 1300s. The Templar fleet did disappear around that time, but no one knows where or what was contained in the cargo. Some speculate that they made their way to Scotland, where they might have inspired the Freemasons, but no one knows for sure. The Templars have lived on in the popular imagination for centuries since their official dissolution, whether through the creation of contemporary branches, works of fiction like the Da Vinci Code or the Assassin's Creed franchise, or through the intrigue of scholars, and anyone who likes a little history.
We've all heard of the Illuminati. They're the guys behind all the political assassinations and fake moon landings, and they'll stop at nothing to bring about the New World Order. Or something. So, how did the Illuminati become the information age's version of the Gestapo, thought police, and Inquisition all rolled into one?
I didn't expect a kind of Spanish Inquisition. Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition.
Hold on to your hats, because we're diving into the secret history of the Illuminati. Bavarian Illuminati. The roots of the Illuminati go back to May 1, 1776, when a college professor named Adam Weishaupt founded a secret refuge for Germans in search of freedom from church domination over philosophy and science. He called it the Illuminati of Bavaria. Think of it as a secret club for wealthy male fans of democracy and tolerance. Soon its lodges appeared elsewhere in Europe, and the secret got too big to hide. As you might expect, non-democratic authorities were none too pleased to learn of Weishaupt's secret club. From 1784 to 1787, Duke Karl Theodor of Bavaria cracked down on secret societies, outlawing the Illuminati. In 1785, Weishaupt skipped town, and the Illuminati of Bavaria shut down. That should have been the end of it, but that's only where the conspiracy theories began. Expanding conspiracy. So why do people still worry about this secret club that was probably defunct centuries ago? Fittingly, it all goes back to one paranoid guy. In the 1790s, a French abbot named Augustin Barruel nearly single-handedly invented the modern idea of the evil-doing Illuminati. According to his theories, the Illuminati went underground and secretly took over the European Freemasonry from the inside, and then sparked the French Revolution of 1789. Barruel explained all his theories in his 4-volume memoirs illustrating the history of Jacobinism. According to Barruel, the Illuminati were medieval Satan worshippers on a quest for ultimate power. Crazy? Sure. But wait, it gets crazier. Double trouble. Augustin Barruel's theory might have been the craziest theory about the French Revolution, but it wasn't the only crazy theory. The same year that Barruel's memoirs came out, Englishman John Robison published Proofs of a Conspiracy, claiming that the Illuminati were a secret threat to governmental stability everywhere. You know how two movies about the same thing sometimes coincidentally come out at the same time?
Coincidence, and the rarer, sexier coinkydinks.
It was like that, but with these two 18th century Illuminati conspiracy books. Guess some things never change. The Crowley Connection. Over the years, the Illuminati's alleged ties to Satanism refused to go away. In the early 1900s, the most messed up satanic elements of Barruel's theory returned, thanks to Aleister Crowley. At the peak of Crowley's notoriety, the media called him the wickedest man in Britain. He certainly was a controversial figure who turned being an Illuminatus into a cool, rebellious idea for weirdos on the fringes of society. Communism. In conspiracy theory culture, what actually happened doesn't matter as much as the stories people tell themselves. And with that in mind, there's one big piece missing from the Illuminati conspiracy story: communism. Where does communism fit in the big Illuminati scheme? For the answer, we need to go back once again to Bavaria at the time of the Holy Roman Empire. According to theories by Brad and Sherry Steiger, the Bavarian Illuminati survived in the form of reading societies devoted to literature and self-improvement. They proposed that Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels were members of those Illuminati reading societies when they wrote the Communist Manifesto in 1848. Steiger goes on to say that historians got it wrong. Communism isn't some idealistic critique of industrial capitalism. He says that communists are Illuminati. By this logic, the Cold War wasn't about fighting communism. It was about resisting the Illuminati plan for a new world order. And, you know what happens next? It gets worse. Henry Ford. Dig deep enough, and the Illuminati conspiracy inevitably goes from adorably nutty to horribly, disgustingly anti-Semitic. And for that we can thank Henry Ford, founder of the Ford Motor Company. In 1921, Ford reprinted an English translation of a Russian propaganda article called The Protocols of the Elders of Zion in his wildly anti-Semitic newspaper, The Dearborn Independent. The protocols supposedly described a secret meeting of evil Jewish men, commonly understood to be Illuminati, who got together to plot world domination. So why does it matter that Henry Ford chose to publish the protocols in his newspaper? Besides getting Ford name-checked in Mein Kampf as one of Hitler's heroes, it also gave both wide distribution and global credibility to anti-Semitic lies, according to the Washington Post. Those same anti-Semitic lies show up constantly in today's Illuminati-obsessed conspiracy theory culture. 20th century takeover. The second half of the 20th century is where a lot of the modern Illuminati conspiracy theories picked up steam. It was kind of inevitable, considering all the clandestine spying and technology advances that were happening at the time. In particular, FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover's COINTELPRO domestic surveillance program for monitoring radical activists was supposedly tied to the Illuminati, as was the CIA's Project MKUltra, a program that dosed soldiers with LSD in the hope of developing super soldiers. Even some presidents supposedly had the inside scoop on the Illuminati threat. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy gave a speech that some corners of the internet call his Illuminati speech. Why? Because of one single line.
And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies.
What secret societies was he talking about? It was 1961, so probably communism, or maybe the mafia. But that wasn't really the point of the speech. It was about the freedom of the press, the same freedom that allows today's conspiracy buffs to claim he was killed by the Illuminati. The Illuminatus trilogy. Pretty soon, paranoia and conspiracy theories went mainstream. Robert Anton Wilson and Robert Shea capitalized on the widespread interest in conspiracy theories by writing the Illuminatus trilogy in 1975, 3 psychedelic, certifiably insane Illuminati-themed novels released as one volume. Based on the most outlandish conspiracy theories the authors learned while editing the Playboy Forum, the Illuminatus trilogy basically established the subgenre of conspiracy fiction and continues to drive interest in sinister secret societies.
You're talking about the Illuminati?
It's no joke.
Digital Illuminati. In theory, just about all of current human knowledge is available on the internet, not to mention roughly 70% of the world's cats in people clothes population. So why is the truth about Illuminati so hard to come by? Well, move over, Al Gore, because according to some conspiracy theorists, the Illuminati invented the internet. Why would they invent the internet? Well, so it's easier to brainwash everyone, obviously.
These telepathic little bastards, they embed themselves in memories, and then they use those to multiply and spread out and take over planets.
In other words, Illuminati conspiracy theories are getting more convoluted with every passing year. Do the Illuminati orchestrate the world's wars? Are they enormous Satanist reptilians who live inside the hollowed-out moon? Is it all part of their plan for a new world order? You can ask the internet, but you probably shouldn't.
Some rich people just have so much time and money on their hands they don't know what to do with it all. The Hellfire Club was made up of those sorts of people. In the 18th century, some of the richest men in Britain and Ireland decided to fill their nights with activities organized under the guise of a club whose name says it all, the Hellfire Club. There were a number of chapters of the club that sprang up throughout the 1700s, and there are a few crucial points that need to be made. They were definitely not part of an official sort of organization, they were incredibly secretive, and they were born from an upper class that had been enraptured by the Enlightenment philosophy. What does that mean? It means they were testing the boundaries of society and good taste, turning their back on what they had been taught about morals, and essentially seeing what they could get away with. Over the centuries, the legend of the Hellfire Club has become a pop culture staple, and their legacy has informed the ways cults and secret societies have been depicted in literature and on screen. But what's the truth? Here's what really went on behind the closed doors of the Hellfire Club. The members of the Hellfire Club had a few things in common. They were rich, they had no regard for the morals of society, they could keep secrets, and they could get out of pretty much any trouble they happened to get into. That means the common folk were left to tell stories about what they thought went on behind those closed doors. Hellfire clubs were commonly linked with tales of satanic rituals and demonic dealings. Simon Luttrell was the sheriff of Dublin City when he was in the Hellfire Club, and there were whispered rumors that he'd sold his soul to the devil. There's also a story that involves a card game with an unfortunate player who dropped a card. As he bent down to pick it up, he noticed that one of his fellow players had a cow's foot. He regained his composure, but after a few hands, he revealed what he'd seen. The hoofed player disappeared, and the man who'd seen his true foot promptly died. According to popular legend, Dublin's Hellfire Club always left one seat empty in case the devil decided to join them. Sometimes truth is stranger than fiction. That was the case with Irish Hellfire Club member Henry Barry, Lord Santry. According to legend, Barry employed a sedan chairman to carry him around, and when the servant was ill and bedridden one day, Barry forced him to drink a quart of brandy, then set the entire bed on fire. Another story says that Barry was attending a Hellfire Club meeting when he forced a man to drink so much brandy it filled his stomach and throat, then lit him on fire. He was never prosecuted for that, but he was arrested for events that happened during a gathering of the Hellfire Club in Palmerstown, Dublin. When someone laughed at Barry, legend says he drew his sword and stabbed a tavern employee. Barry's bribery worked for a while, but he was eventually found guilty for the murder. Barry only dodged execution because his wealthy landowning uncle threatened to cut off Dublin's drinking water, and Barry scored a royal pardon. Mixing fire and booze was also a particular pastime of Hellfire Club member Richard Chappell Whaley. He had an unhealthy obsession with fire, and according to rumor, he eventually burned Hellfire Club's Montpelier Hill headquarters to the ground after dousing a servant in brandy and setting him on fire. Sounds like there was a lot of that going on. It's difficult to separate legend from truth because the Hellfire Club most commonly met at the Eagle Tavern, not Montpelier Hill. But historians do seem to agree that club meetings were kicked off with a drink called Scalfing, which was essentially whiskey, butter, pepper, and sugar. The Herald says one of the more popular drinking games they played was drinking, quote, while standing close enough to a roasting fire to melt the marrow in their bones. The last man standing was the winner. Couldn't they have just played Clue instead?
Flames on the side of my face.
Regardless of whether they were drinking to the devil, the Hellfire Club was definitely drinking to something. Chapter members in England recorded some of the names of their cocktails like Gin and Sin and Strip Me Naked. They also referred to members as 3 or 4 bottled men based on how many bottles of port they could drink at a time. Simon Luttrell was one of the more notorious members of Ireland's Hellfire Club. Supposedly, Darky Kelly, the madam of a Dublin brothel, became pregnant with Luttrell's child and tried to blackmail him. He accused her of being a witch, and she was tried and executed. Straightforward enough, but there may have been a little more to it. Newspaper reports from the time suggest Luttrell, who was a member of the House of Commons and the Sheriff of Dublin at the time, may have had a different role. Kelly's execution came in 1760, not 1746 as it was claimed, after she was put on trial for the murder of a local shoemaker named John Dowling. Authorities searched her property, found the bodies of 5 men, and she was found guilty. After unsuccessfully trying to get a stay of execution for a pregnancy she didn't have, she was strangled until she was nearly dead, then burned to death. According to researchers, Kelly's story was probably confused with another scandal involving Luttrell, one where his son was accused of sexually assaulting a teenage girl. During the Enlightenment, people started to question what they'd been taking on faith for a long time. The wealthy rakes of the Hellfire Club were highly skeptical of Christianity in particular, and according to one letter written by a member under the pseudonym Morlock, a lot of what they were doing was essentially thumbing their noses at organized religion. Morlock wrote of a club practice called the Sacrifice of the Maidens, but historians think it's not entirely what it seems. It was likely taking a woman's virginity, and they were doing it while pledging allegiance to old pagan gods. When Philip Wharton first started the Hellfire Club, it was officially dedicated to drinking, lewdness, and puerile acts of blasphemy. Members would dress as monks and characters from the Bible, and it seems as though the anti-religious stuff was what authorities really took issue with. Wharton's club was closed in 1721 due to blasphemy and profaneness. When Sir Francis Dashwood founded his drinking and debauchery club in the 1750s, he called it the Knights of Sir Francis of Wickham. Kellyanne Williams, who works on the West Wickham estate, says the Hellfire Club label came later, but it stuck. She told the BBC that beneath Dashwood's estate is a series of tunnels, the purpose of which are entirely unknown. Inside those tunnels is the Inner Temple, an extra secret room at the bottom of a series of secret rooms that was so off limits that the highest ranking members could only access it by boat. There are some clues as to what went on there. Silverware and drinking vessels have survived, and Williams says wine and women were undoubtedly the most popular things in the caverns. She also says historians were close to having complete documentation of all Hellfire Club activities. Paul Whitehead acted as the club's steward and recorded everything that went on. Unfortunately for history, he spent the 3 days prior to his death burning all club records. There is a strangely happy footnote to this all, though. Dashwood ordered the caves excavated as a way to provide jobs for locals who were suffering through a series of crop failures. Dashwood was in Italy when he developed his seething hatred of the Roman Catholic Church, and even before his knights assembled first in London's George and Vulture pub, he had a certain fondness for commissioning some of the era's finest artists to do insanely blasphemous portraits of him, including one where he ogles a statue of Venus. For his club, he acquired Medmenham Abbey and inscribed the motto Face que voldras, or do what thou wilt, over the door.
What is the password?
Orgy. Supposedly, Dashwood built a temple dedicated to Bacchus on his estate and became obsessed with the idea his estate encompassed an old pagan site. When he had his labyrinth of caves excavated, he made sure the ancient deities were included. According to the era's coffeehouse gossips, part of the rituals that went on there were so-called sacrifices to both Bacchus and Venus. The members of the Hellfire Club were all among the upper crust: lords and earls, military officers, members of parliament. As you might expect, politics and debauchery weren't always separate, and on at least one occasion, a prank gone wrong may have had drastic repercussions. John Wilkes was a poet and controversial politician who was ousted from Parliament because of charges of libel brought by John Montague, Lord Sandwich. Wilkes and Thomas Potter, the son of the Archbishop of Canterbury, had taken Alexander Pope's Essay on Man and written a parody called Essay on Woman. Wilkes had been in the process of printing 12 copies, likely for his fellow Hellfire Club members, when Sandwich brought charges against him. Apparently, Sandwich had hated Wilkes for a while, ever since Wilkes had decided it would be funny to dress a baboon as the devil and let it loose during one of the club's services in Dashwood's Medmenham Abbey. Sandwich, believing it was the devil coming to get his soul, fled as fast as he could and never forgave Wilkes for the humiliation. After the libel trial, Wilkes was found guilty, fled to France, and was declared an outlaw. Of all the Hellfire Club's misdeeds, the authorities really had the biggest problem with the blasphemy.
You know, 300 years ago, you'd have been burned at the stake for saying something like that.
300 years ago, I wouldn't have said it.
In 1738, a painter named Peter Lenz found himself under investigation by the Committee for Religion. He was a self-confessed member of the Blasters, which was likely just another name of Dublin's Hellfire Club. The Blasters had become well known for publicly praying to the devil and disrupting church services. In reality, they no more believed in the devil than they believed in God, and they just used blasphemy as a way to offend the establishment. Even though there have been artifacts that seem to show diabolical imagery, that doesn't mean they actually worship the devil. Historians think any rites and rituals were done in part to heighten the club's mysterious image, and in part because they thought it was just pretty hilarious. No one else did, and Lenz was ultimately arrested for his blasphemous and disruptive actions. While there were definitely some Hellfire Club members who were more into murder than mayhem, there's one antidote that speaks volumes to the mentality of the men in the club. High above Francis Dashwood's estate is a gold sphere perched on top of the Church of St. Lawrence. There's just enough room inside for a few people to look out not only over the countryside, but over Dashwood's gardens, which have been planted in the shape of a curvaceous and very naked woman. Not only did the garden feature some carefully placed pink rose bushes and triangles of forest, but there were also strategically placed fountains that could be turned on with a signal from Dashwood. Dashwood was reportedly a fan of taking members of the clergy up into the sphere to see his massive lady garden, and according to Sir Edward, the modern Dashwood descendant in charge of the estate, a lot of what actually went on at the Hellfire Club was all in good fun. He says, Sir Francis wasn't crazy, he was just a tremendous character, and he had bloody good fun. They all dressed up and drank a hell of a lot. People want what they can't have, or so the old saying goes. This applies to what people can't see as well. Secret places are fascinating and make people wonder why those with privileged access would want to keep them out. Let's look at what we know about some of them. No list of secretive places would be complete without Area 51, so let's get it out of the way first. This subsection of the Nellis Air Force Complex has hosted numerous experiments, including but not limited to the U-2 spy program and the F-117 stealth fighter. However, Area 51 is better known for a more esoteric reason: the US government supposedly hiding evidence of alien contact there. In 2019, a campaign on Facebook appeared called Storm Area 51, They Can't Stop All of Us. This event, which may have been a joke, proposed a run on Area 51 using sheer numbers. The military, however, didn't find it quite so funny. USAF spokeswoman Laura McAndrews issued an ominous threat which suggests the US government would respond with force to protect the base. It was obvious they were serious, and it was feared that the event could potentially turn into a humanitarian disaster. But it all raised the question, what exactly is there to protect? Those who believe the truth is out there, or more specifically hidden behind the fences and security of Area 51, say the US government is allegedly hiding the Roswell wreckage and the bodies of the alien pilots.
Does this look like the work of Little Green Man?
Gray.
Excuse me?
You said green men. A reticulant skin tone is actually gray.
Although the event failed to materialize, it seems that Area 51 aficionados may have been vindicated. On June 17, 2020, former Nevada Senator Harry Reid, in an interview with ABC affiliate KNTV Las Vegas, stated that the government had covered up hundreds and hundreds of UFO sightings, although he did not comment on the alleged experiments on alien life that some claim occur in the base.
We have all the answers? No, we don't have many answers at all. We know they exist, and we should continue doing everything we can to learn more about them.
With this information, it definitely seems like there's more to Area 51 than spy programs and nuclear testing. Although, even if it's just that, that's still pretty cool. Ethiopia boasts a rich Christian history going back to the 4th century AD when King Izana of Aksum embraced this new religion. But Ethiopia was also intricately linked with Judaism, which allegedly resulted in the greatest treasure of the Judeo-Christian tradition making its way into East Africa. According to the biblical Book of Kings, it started when the Queen of Sheba visited King Solomon to learn his wisdom. Ethiopian tradition claims that she left with a son named Menelik, whom Solomon anointed as ruler of the Ethiopians. However, either out of nostalgia for their homeland or due to the Jewish people's abandonment of God, some Israelites accompanied the Queen of Sheba to Yemen and eventually Africa, and they took the Ark of the Covenant with them. Over 3,000 years later, the Ark of the Covenant allegedly rests in the Church of Our Lady of Mount Zion in Aksum. It's said that only one virgin monk, who may never leave the grounds, can see it. Everyone else is forbidden to be anywhere near it. The story has its skeptics, most famously Professor Edward Ollendorf, who claimed to have seen the Ark during World War II. And no, we're not talking about this guy.
We have top men working on it right now. Who? Top men.
Ollendorf claimed that what he saw was a medieval forgery or reproduction. However, when pressed for proof, Ollendorf refused, not wanting to offend his Ethiopian friends. Because of strong religious beliefs and the lethal consequences if the Ark is indeed there, the question remains a matter of faith. In the Bay of Bengal, isolated until very recently from much of the world, are the Andaman Islands, whose inhabitants are believed to be among the first people to settle South Asia. Today, the islands are part of India, whose administration is present on the whole archipelago, almost. The exception is the North Sentinel Island, which lies west of the main archipelago. The islanders are among the last uncontacted people in the world. The Sentinelese refuse all contact with the outside world, showering any intruders with hails of arrows and ensuring they're left alone. The Sentinelese live a hunter-gatherer existence and speak a language not mutually intelligible with other Andaman languages. In January 1991, an Indian team was able to make cordial contact with them by floating coconuts, but this wasn't enough to learn their language or lifestyles in depth. As it stands now, it's unlikely the Sentinelese will give up their secrets anytime soon. Contact is rife with ethical ramifications. The islanders lack immunity to everyday diseases of the developed world due to their millennia of isolation. Any contact would likely kill off most of the islanders, so for now, the island will remain a secret paradise. In the Indian Ocean's Chagos archipelago lies the remote island of Diego Garcia. According to the BBC, the inhabitants of this beautiful island, along with the rest of the archipelago, suffered eviction from 1967 to 1973. Recent attempts for resettlement were denied for financial reasons, but the real reason is more likely the presence of a top-secret American base on Diego Garcia. In many ways, it's just a typical American naval base, but with one big old twist. Only naval personnel and civilian contractors directly involved in the daily operations of the base are permitted there. Spouses and all other outsiders are not allowed on the island, period. The key to Diego Garcia's secrecy is likely its alleged CIA black ops and role as a so-called extraordinary rendition site. Bush administration official Lawrence Wilkerson told Vice that the CIA had flown terror suspects to the island for interrogations, which likely included torture. Hence, the island is part of a network of secret CIA prisons, which would explain the secrecy around it. This redwood grove in Sonoma County, California is notorious in conspiracy circles. It's accessible only by invitation and is managed by the Bohemian Club of San Francisco. Rumors about this place are anything but positive, including that it's guarded by snipers and that the grove serves as a place to conduct satanic rituals before a giant owl statue. But what is known for sure about this place? All that can be said with absolute certainty about the Grove is that it serves as a midsummer retreat for the global elite. U.S. presidents, including Nixon, Reagan, Clinton, and both Bushes, have visited the retreat alongside politicians from around the world, bankers, financiers, royalty, Ivy League academics, and industrialists. According to the Washington Post, it is a place where the world's wealthy go to get drunk, blow off steam, and generally misbehave. Those few people who have managed to infiltrate the Grove claim they've seen bizarre scenes, like the Grove's members dressing up in pagan costumes for the so-called cremation of the care ceremony. So is it a secret society or a summer camp? No one outside the elite member circle is sure. Due to the sensitive nature of the place and the presence of so many important, powerful people, it is unlikely that anyone outside will be finding out much more. But who doesn't like a good conspiracy theory? The papal libraries are restricted, but not necessarily secret, at least not in the same way the Bohemian Grove or Area 51 are secret. The name is a mistranslation of the Latin, and it means inaccessible to non-owners. It comes from the archive status as the Pope's personal archive, and remained super secret until 1881, when scholars were granted access under Pope Leo XIII. Nevertheless, its secrecy has spawned theories that the church is hiding aliens, Jesus' true bloodline, and even a time machine. As awesome as that would be, it's unlikely. Sorry, but that's not to say there's not a ton of awesome stuff in there. In reality, the library contains a treasure trove of fascinating documents, such as Martin Luther's Bull of Excommunication, the Papal Bull absolving the Templars, and Henry VIII's request for an annulment. But because it's only open to scholars whom the Vatican vets, the Holy See has been accused of hiding damaging material from the 20th century. Cardinals' personal documents from 1922 onward are restricted, as are documents pertaining to papacies after 1939. However, the Vatican has taken steps toward greater transparency by digitizing the documents to make them accessible to the greater public. The latest collection concerns Pope Pius XII and the Holocaust, as the Church aims to dispel accusations of papal complicity in the bloody 20th century genocide. The 2004 U.S. presidential election pitted George Bush against John Kerry. Although the two were political rivals, they ultimately came from very similar backgrounds, and both were members of Yale's most exclusive secret society, Skull and Bones. This society, like the Bohemian Grove retreat, has attracted mostly negative attention for a host of accusations, which range from the theft of Geronimo's skull by none other than Prescott Bush to crippling America's education system. There is no doubt that Skull and Bones is a highly influential society. It boasts 3 presidents, Taft and both Bushes, and numerous members of industry, finance, and politics. Yale juniors are tapped and initiated into the society, but no one knows exactly what happens in their meeting house, which is known as the Tomb. In 2001, the Yale Daily News reported that several Yale students caught aerial footage of a Skull and Bones initiation in the courtyard of the Tomb in which neophytes were acting out murder. Former Bonesmen claim that this was definitely not in the tradition of the society, but there is no actual way for anyone to confirm that, because no one outside the society is allowed to see what is happening. As President George W. Bush said, what goes on in there is so secret that it cannot be discussed. Poveglia Island forms part of the Venetian archipelago, but it's not on any package tour. It's unclear why the Italian government forbids travel to the island, but because Poveglia is abandoned, there are numerous legends that speak of an island haunted by its grisly history. Poveglia was a quarantine site for the sick when it was part of the Republic of Venice. Undoubtedly, numerous people perished here from plague and isolation. Under Napoleon, it was a weapons depot and later an insane asylum. With such history, it is no surprise that the island has had its share of gruesome ghost stories, a reputation augmented by the ban of all visitors. Among the legends of Poveglia, one stands out. According to Venetian locals, a doctor at the asylum performed lobotomies and other experiments on the inmates, killing many. Eventually, he met his end by either jumping off the bell tower or being thrown from it. The bells are said to still ring on dark nights to this day, even though the bell was removed decades after the center closed in 1975. Because of its horrific reputation as a mass graveyard of society's most vulnerable, the island is known as the world's most haunted place. Russia is famous for closed cities and secret underground constructions that make the country legendary in the conspiracy world. Russian activities have drawn attention to a particular military base near Okolnia Bay, where Russia is believed to possess a deadly weapon.
Following total atomic annihilation, the rebuilding of this great nation of ours may fall to you.
Russia has staged a massive military buildup in Okolnia Bay with missile launchers, a submarine harbor, and bunkers. A triple layer of barbed wire suggests that the facility is top secret. But why is Okolnia Bay so important? Apart from a potential flashpoint for conflict with NATO in the Arctic, the Barents Observer has suggested a second reason. In 2018, a Pentagon report released through Newsweek claimed that Russia had developed unmanned underwater drones that could carry nukes virtually undetected, even to the US East Coast. It's been proposed that Okolnia Bay was the base for Russia's nuclear submarines capable of launching these automated torpedoes, referred to as Poseidon drones. That's the sort of thing that makes for a terrifying vision of the future.
Radiation poisoning may have enlarged your favorite meals. This means more healthful nutrition for you.
Not all secret places have dark, horrible histories that involve torture, the plague, mysterious deaths, and the potential end of the world. So let's wrap up with something that will serve as sort of a mental cleanser. Like these puppies. You're welcome. The Coca-Cola Company is headquartered in Atlanta and even offers tours of the facility for soda history aficionados everywhere. However, there is one part that is off limits to virtually everyone. Originally, the Coca-Cola recipe was passed down orally. This is until a group of investors insisted to founder John Pemberton that it be written down. First kept in a high-security vault in a bank, the company decided to turn the recipe into its central marketing gig, moving it to a heavily secured vault at company headquarters that tourists can pass and see but cannot enter. The tour, complete with sound effects and attractive visuals, takes tours so tantalizingly close to one of the beverage world's greatest secrets. It's a great promotional tactic, and it seems to have worked, as Coke has been around for over 125 years. All that can be said about the Coca-Cola recipe is that, hopefully, it does not contain cocaine anymore. Even in the 21st century, it's surprisingly not uncommon for women to still be barred from entering certain places around the world, often for pretty dubious reasons. Keep watching for those locations where women are simply not allowed to enter. Designated a World Heritage Site by UNESCO in 1988, Mount Athos is a collection of 20 monasteries situated on the Chalcidice Peninsula in Greece. It's run as a semi-autonomous republic, and it's been a sacred site for the Greek Orthodox religion since the 11th century.
It hasn't changed in 1,000 years.
It's a spectacularly beautiful place and a popular tourist destination for those lucky enough to gain access. The monasteries allow 100 Orthodox and 10 non-Orthodox pilgrims to come to the monasteries each day. The pilgrims are allowed to stay for 3 days, but they have to be men, as women are not allowed within 500 meters of the coastline. In fact, not only are human women not allowed, but female animals are barred as well. There's both a spiritual and practical rationale behind the ban. Having 0 women is thought to assist the monks in maintaining their vows of celibacy, and on top of that, the peninsula is dedicated to the Virgin Mary, who's supposed to be the only woman to walk around there. Iran isn't especially known for leading the world on gender equality, but their policies regarding soccer games are especially bizarre. Although there's been some movement toward change in recent years, by and large, women are still not allowed to attend sporting events at major stadiums in the country. The ban was imposed in 1979 after the Iranian Revolution placed a religious theocracy in charge of the country. The justification was that mingling sexes was forbidden and that women might witness some coarse behavior and would be exposed to men dressed in improper clothing like shorts. This has started to change, however, as reported by BBC News in 2019. A woman named Sahar Khodayari, nicknamed Blue Girl after the colors of her favorite team, was arrested when she defied the law and tried to enter a stadium to watch a game. When she was released, she set herself on fire in front of the local courthouse. The outcry led to increased international pressure, and Iran began to allow a few women into stadiums. But many see this as a meaningless gesture, as only a tiny number of tickets are allowed to be sold to women for any given event.
I wish everyone be able to go to a stadium in Iran.
Finding out that faraway places ban women from entering is one thing, but surely in the United States the idea is patently ridiculous. And in most cases it is, but not when we're talking about a certain sport with an unfortunate history of exclusivity. There are actually still a handful of golf clubs that don't allow female members, and one of the most egregious is Burning Tree, located in Bethesda, Maryland. It's so dedicated to this policy that it reportedly doesn't even have women's bathrooms. Women are only allowed for a single 3-hour period in December so that they can shop for gifts for their husbands at the club shop. The reason this discrimination is legal is because these golf clubs are private and therefore not open to the general public. In recent years, many of the clubs that traditionally barred women have changed their policies in response to both public pressure and the cost of going against the grain. Burning Tree, for example, pays an additional $150,000 a year in taxes because of its discriminatory policies. And this is also an issue across the pond. In 2016, the British Open's organizing entity announced that the Muirfield course in Scotland would no longer be the site of future British Opens if it remained a men's-only club. The Bohemian Club was founded in 1872 as a private gentlemen's club in San Francisco. In 1899, it began using a campground called the Bohemian Grove for an annual retreat. Originally a club for writers and artists seeking the so-called Bohemian lifestyle, it's become a super-secret club for wealthy and powerful men, but no women. In fact, until a lawsuit in 1978, the club didn't even include women among its staff. The Bohemian Club has actually conferred honorary membership on 4 women over those years, but even those honorary members aren't allowed to attend the annual retreat at Bohemian Grove. Even men find it difficult to join. According to Vanity Fair, the waiting list for a membership can take decades, and it costs $25,000 just for the initiation fee.
This is a place filled with secrets that only those who go inside and perhaps the trees will ever really know.
Sometimes modern problems can lead to modern solutions. In this case, some of the country's powerful women have gotten tired of waiting for their invitations and have created their own parallel club known as the Billionaires Grove. Founded in 1999, it doesn't allow men to join, and it specifically works toward a cherished feminist goal to elect a female U.S. president. Perhaps unsurprisingly, many of the places that ban women do so for religious reasons. Many of these rules were formulated centuries ago, but times change. In India, for example, a 2018 Supreme Court ruling forced a Hindu temple with a tradition of barring women between the ages of 10 and 50, because they might be menstruating, to allow women inside. The decision was controversial, though, and it set off protests. And there are other religious shrines in India that continue to ban women, albeit often unofficially. For one, there's the Lord Kartikeya Temple in the district of Pushkar. Although it doesn't actually ban women, it simply informs them that they will be cursed if they insist on entering. In Hindu traditions, Kartikeya is the oldest son of Lord Shiva, and he's also the Hindu god of war. The legend is that Shiva had his 2 sons, Ganesha and Kartikeya, race to determine who would be his heir. When Ganesha won through a clever trick, Kartikeya blamed his mother and declared that if any woman saw him, she would be, quote, widowed for 7 successive births. The city of Chicago once had many male-only single-room occupancy hotels, which offered a single small room for a very small amount of money. They sprang up to serve the waves of industrial workers who migrated to the city to find work. Most are gone today, but the Ewing Annex Hotel still exists, and it remains off-limits to women due to the specific requirements of its hotel license from the city. The rooms are incredibly small, just large enough for a twin bed and a few possessions, but they cost only $19 a night or $360 a month. As reported by Block Club Chicago, the Ewing now serves a crucial role for the city's poor and homeless. Someone without regular income might not be able to afford an apartment or even a regular hotel for the evening, but a $19 per night room is often within reach. This becomes even more important during the winter when brutal cold hits the city. According to Streetwise magazine, many of the Ewing's occupants have struggled with substance abuse problems, and most of the residents have lived there for a very long time, sometimes decades. There have been several efforts to shut down hotels like the Ewing, as many believe that the tiny suffocating rooms are unfit for human habitation. But these efforts have thus far been unsuccessful. When you think of places where women might be banned, you probably think of stern religious institutions and ancient temples, or stuffy clubs where old white dudes smoke cigars and chortle about suffrage. One place that you probably don't think of is the local water park. But as it turns out, there is indeed an actual water park ride that is forbidden to women. It's called the Extreme Faser Water Slide, and it's located at Galaxy Waterslide World in Bavaria, Germany. As reported by The Telegraph, the initial banning occurred in 2012 after several women complained of so-called intimate injuries from the ride. People can hit speeds of up to 45 miles per hour on the slide, and at least 6 women suffered injuries to their genital areas during descent. The reason for this was a mystery even to medical experts, as a gynecological association told the newspaper that pregnancy is the only condition that should prevent women from using the slide. The park promised that it was developing a bodysuit that women could wear in order to enjoy the ride safely. The park's website still specifies that the Extreme Faser is only available for men. It seems that mysterious intimate area injuries due to water slides continue to defy all engineering and medical science. London's gentlemen's clubs have a long history that dates back to the 17th century. These social clubs began in a time before restaurants and nightclubs existed. The rich and powerful needed places where they could host dinners or meet up casually. Thus, exclusive private clubs were formed as an escape from the world, a place where men could relax and hang out, complete with dining rooms and casinos, since gambling was legal in a private space. White's is one of the oldest surviving gentlemen's clubs, and it was founded in 1693. If you're wondering how exclusive it is, Prince Charles is a member, and it doesn't allow women in its ranks. The only woman who has ever been allowed inside for a visit is Queen Elizabeth II, who popped by back in 1991 and never went back. That means that 37 St. James Place in Piccadilly is a discreet place in modern London where women simply cannot go. White's isn't the only male club left. As reported by The Guardian, there has been a growing movement to push these clubs to admit women, but several, including White's, have resisted. The problem may eventually resolve itself on its own, though, as the membership at White's has shrunk to about 500. If you've visited Japan's Okinoshima Island, we already know two things about you. One, you're a man, and two, you've taken a vow of secrecy. The island contains a shrine to the sea goddess established in the 17th century, and it's been closed to women for centuries. The shrine was once a site for rituals intended to ensure the safe passage of ships. Priests of the Shinto religion are permitted to go to the island in order to worship at the shrine. Once a year, 200 men are allowed to visit to honor the deaths of Japanese sailors during the 1905 war with Russia. But first, they must strip naked and go through a purification ritual and take nothing from the island, not even pebbles. Furthermore, they must agree to never speak of what they see or experience there. That last stipulation is one reason why Okinoshima is sometimes referred to as the Island of Mystery. The shrine itself cannot be entered without permission, and even certain words can't be spoken. While there is no official explanation for the ban of female visitors, it's noted that in the Shinto religion, blood is considered impure, and that includes menstrual blood.
Another argument is that the ban protects women from the dangers of the sea.
On the island of Grand Comore, part of the nation of Comoros off the eastern coast of Africa, there is a beach that has been open only to men since 2012. As reported by Global Voices, Milimaji Beach was closed to women because of religious reasons, despite the fact that it had previously been open to anyone for decades. Local religious leaders reportedly made the request. This isn't entirely surprising. Comoros is an Islamic nation. In 2013, Sunni Islam was named the official religion, and Shia Islam was banned. Homosexuality is also officially illegal in the country. In other words, this isn't exactly the sort of place you'd expect to find tolerant, open-minded laws. The effort to close the beach to women wasn't without controversy. Many in the country saw it as an effort to model Comoros on organizations like the Taliban, as well as a direct challenge by local religious leaders to the authority of the constitutional state.